Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of the IntelliCast. I'm your host, Kyle. Today, I'm joined by a couple of very special guests. They're from a company we partner with called Duo, and they're experts in all things multi-factor and two-factor authentication. So, Seth, if you're on this side, according to my video, you want to do me a favor and introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us on the IntelliCast. My name is Seth. I work exclusively with our partners at Duo, help them protect a wide range of customer environments. So, we work in the federal sector, publicly traded companies, all the way to mom and pop shops, law firms, and dentist office. So it really runs the gamut there.
Nice. I use Duo going way back. If you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, definitely will. My name is Christo. I'm here with Duo as well. Specific title is partner manager over on the Duo team. So supporting the Northeast territory in all of Canada. So if you're fitting into those, you're probably going to come across me at some point in time, but happy to be a part of the conversation and share some more insight into 2FA, MFA, and everything above.
Fantastic. Well, I'm super excited to have you guys here. It's always fun to do these, and it's always fun to have these great kind of conversations, especially with everyone's mind on security nowadays. And in my years of being in IT, security has rapidly changed in our landscape. From just in general being, hey, protect your passwords, right? Don't write it down. That's always a common thing nowadays. And what have you guys seen from your perspective with the changes that have been occurring recently? Like, what are some of the differences that you guys have seen?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing we've seen, to be really specific, is a massive expansion of the attack surface. Essentially all that means is way more remote access, and the meaning of remote has changed. Not just people working from home, but we have this, profusion of cloud applications, of external vendors and contractors. There are points of consolidation like single sign-on. And then there are points, of expansion, like third-party applications that your users might have to log into. And so, like, that expansion of the attack surface makes it possible for folks to try accessing your applications from almost anywhere in the world. So it's just a really simple, arithmetic relationship between how big is the attack surface and what your risk of a breach is. Back in the traditional office environment where everything was on-prem and closely held, someone had to get within those four walls to breach you. And there were some very interesting social engineering methods used in those days, namely calling up offices and asking for employees to divulge information. So, that's becoming a lost art.
It's actually one of my favorite pastimes. Just social. Yeah. It's fascinating. Social engineering is an incredible, mind-blowing, just way to get information that you shouldn't have.
It's really similar to the way attacks are engineered. It's like, do you speak the language? Can you credibly pose as someone internal to that company? Like, every company has their own lingo, the way you formulate requests to another department. And I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but he wrote a book about being a phone freak in the 70s and 80s, and what that means is
it Mitnick?
Yeah, Kevin Mitnick, exactly. So these were the very early days of the internet, and there were already folks finding very elaborate and highly illegal ways to gain access, and he did it just for the fun of it. Nowadays, the art has turned into a business with all the ransomware. I think a lot of folks have probably heard on the news these organizations have customer support lines that you can call if you're facing a ransom, so they can help you get the Bitcoin and send it to the right wallet. I've digressed a ton there.
I mean, it's
but
true,
just
though.
Gives you a sense of what's going on.
I recently saw a blurb on a specific subtype of ransomware that compared themselves to other ransomware variants, and had like a stat tracking that showed they encrypted files faster than their competition, and that they did it faster. They had the option of, if it moved systems without having, if it propagated itself, it's just like it's an eye opener that it is 100% now an actual legitimate business, and they're making a lot of money with very little, requirements to develop or be a true business.
My question is, can I write off the ransom I've paid from my taxes? And, are these guys getting the ransoms reporting it? Because it just goes from bad to worse if you're not in compliance.
That's true. I think I read a recent survey that said that like 83% of businesses paid the ransom. And that's a scary, considering the numbers I've seen thrown out, yeah. That is a scary amount of money that these people are bringing in.
And it just brings in more and more investment, right? It increases the size of the pie, and bringing it back to how security has changed in the past, decades, even the very concept of cybersecurity, it's that expansion of the attack surface. We're connected in more and more ways, and that creates more and more opportunities and risks of being breached. The other side of that, though, is on balance, this is a great thing. Like, think about when COVID hit, remote work would have been impossible to engineer the way we've done it. Maybe not 10, but 15 years ago, certainly. So the world didn't come to a stop just because folks were unable to go into the office. The productivity, the convenience that cloud applications allow, as a company, Duo is all for that. And, the philosophy here is you have to find a way to strike a balance between the right level of security, which corresponds to a certain risk of a breach. There's always a risk, and the right level of usability and convenience. Certainly, you'd be very locked down, very secure if every time you entered a keystroke, you had to do authentication with your second factor. That would be completely unworkable. Yeah. I can see Kyle's face there. Yeah, I shudder to think.
From my end, and I know it's needed.
Exactly. And, for us, it's just a hit of dopamine every time that notification comes through. We love it. So give us more.
Yeah. So, I'm young. I'm 33 now, I believe. Some would consider young anyway. Look younger, evidently, what people tell me.
Younger than the Astros starting pitcher last night. So,
yeah. Did they win? I think
they did.
We're definitely getting off topic now.
Yeah.
So, I can go back to, the security back in the day with going just passwords in general. It was the length and the complexity. Don't make it something like password. Don't make it something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And year after year, the most common password that's been breached, that list that comes out, is just like the number 1, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, followed by password 1. And it's from a user perspective, entering passwords is annoying. From a security perspective, it's a necessary evil. And I know password complexity requirements have gone up drastically since the early 2000s even. So have you guys seen any transition from your side, how the complexity works with uppercase, lowercase to requiring symbols and being 30 characters long?
Password complexity, it's a really fascinating topic because there are mathematicians and cryptographers who study it, and they'll tell you, okay, if you have 1,000 attempts per second, it will take you 3.7 weeks to crack a 6-character password using any special characters, letters of the alphabet, numbers. That's actually not the most relevant thing for a typical company who's looking to address their security risk, though. Because like you said earlier there, Kyle, a lot of people use very simple dictionary words in combination with numbers for their passwords. And these brute force pieces of software, which you can buy yourself on the darknet if you were so inclined, they're not going to random distributions or combinations of numbers and letters, because that's not how people's brains work. They're going to dictionary words, 100, 200 most commonly used passwords. And here's the key thing. You could have a 100-character password, but if you enter that on the wrong site, if you get phished, it doesn't matter how complex it is. That's the keys to the castle you've given away right there. One other thing I will mention is there's the case where a user is phished, let's say on their corporate account. They get an email, there's a malicious link that says, hey, reset your password, enter your old one to confirm. Another scenario, and so many folks are guilty of this. I know, in my life, at previous organizations, never at Duo, I've done this, reused a password, right, in different places. So there are people likely at your company right now, and it's totally understandable, who are using the same password for their corporate email as they use for their personal email, as they use for their Netflix account, as they used for MySpace in 2007. And there's a site called Have I Been Pwned or Have I Been Owned.com, and you can search your email, your phone number, and see if those passwords have been compromised. Right now, they've got a running tally of 11 billion pwned or owned accounts, and attackers are going to download repositories of that too. So
I'm in there.
Yeah. I mean, people at this point, we've given them the idea to look us up.
My high school password is listed in there because I used it on some site that got compromised, and now it's all over the darknet. Everyone has access to it. I mean, I don't use that because it was super simplistic even for then, but anyone, it's not, if your data is breached, it's available for anyone to utilize. Like, it's not, and it's always going to be there. It's like, it goes back to the internet. If you put it on the internet, it's there forever.
Yeah. So, and initially people were up in arms about this site, like, hey, you're putting my password out there for everyone to see. Actually, the audience is you. You want to see whether you've been pwned or not, and change that password right away. But this naturally leads, if it's all right, Kyle, like into the MFA conversation.
Yeah.
Because increasingly what you have to assume is that your password has been or will be compromised. What happens next? And that's where MFA comes into the picture. It's out of band, meaning it comes through a separate system. And it's not a second password that's static. It's actually something you physically have, that you have access to. So whether that's your cell phone, whether it's this little USB-C key that I'm holding in my hand right here, whether it's a hardware token, the entire idea is, even though the attack surface for your Outlook or your Gmail login might be anywhere in the world in principle, an attacker has to physically possess that device, that second factor, in order to gain access. So spending a lot of words explaining the value of two-factor authentication, but it is worth bearing out just how conceptually this reduces, to make it virtually impossible to breach with a password alone.
Yeah, and it goes back to the security in layers, right? You always want to have that set up. You want to have multiple layers, and there are ways to make multi-factor authentication not, or, to be able to take that as well. It's a lot harder to do, and it's much more targeted to do. And if someone's targeting you as a company, as a business, there's very little you can do to prevent. I mean, you can put all the stoplights in place, you can set up all the security in the world, you can spend millions of dollars per month just securing your setup. But if someone's targeting you, they're going to find a way in, and there's very little you can do about it. But for what most attackers do, it's just they throw out a net, and whatever they can bring back in, that's what they're going to do. And MFA it's almost a requirement nowadays, just to make sure that your company is safe. Passwords are, Microsoft's even talking about removing passwords from their setups. So multi-factor authentication is a key element in making sure that your simplistic passwords, even though they have numbers and characters in them, are protected, even if they're breached. And now, multi-factor doesn't prevent you from not changing your password and being cautious with your complexity. But it does allow you to, if you are breached, you have that extra layer of protection.
Absolutely.
So what MFA and 2FA are two separate things. Can you define what each of those mean?
Yeah. Sure. Christo, do you want to give it a start?
Sure, definitely. So 2FA, in my mind, really is that native 2FA that you'll see on a, whether it's a bank account, whether it's, a third-party application that has it just attached to it. So basically you'll have one way to authenticate, being your username and password. And the other way would be sending a 6-digit code through that application to where you'll manually have to type it in. Those codes will be generated, every 30 seconds, however that application functions. Again, it's not separated from it. It's just kind of built into the package. So 2FA there is kind of a generic way to handle it. MFA allows you to have multiple ways of authenticating. So that's kind of where Duo comes into play, where we offer you guys the majority of, downloading our app, pressing that button on the side to just approve. If you are who you say you are and you have that device in your hand, that's great. You're going to get let in. If you're in an environment that doesn't allow that, maybe you have some restrictions, we can go ahead and integrate with a hardware token or a U2F token. So the one Seth held up earlier, it's just a simple touch. You're going in there, you're able to get back to work. So whether it's the app, the hardware token, a phone call, text message, even that 6-digit code that I mentioned earlier, it's kind of where we're super flexible and want to have your best interests at heart just to get back to work there.
Yeah, and on the distinction between 2FA and MFA, or multi-factor authentication, the way we think about it is 2-factor authentication is a kind of multi-factor authentication, but when you look at multi-factor, you consider that, okay, I log in with my username and password. That's the first factor, the set of credentials. I get the push notification, right? That's a second factor, is the device actually serving up that notification. But there's a third hidden factor that a lot of folks use potentially dozens, hundreds of times a day, and it's their biometrics, right? When you look at your phone, chances are you're not able to interact with that notification unless you do your Face ID or your Touch ID first. And that's a policy you can enforce with Duo, requiring that screen lock or biometric is enabled. Now, sometimes, of course, a passcode can be used in lieu of the Face ID or Touch ID, but that still is an additional factor. It just changes from a biometric to a knowledge factor. So this is a long-winded way of saying MFA is just the 2 or more steps of authentication, and they're sequential. Crucially, it's not given at the same time. So that's something to consider as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good information. Like even certain websites have instituted 2FA on their side so that you can, like Bank of America, I know does this. Like if you log into a Bank of America account, you're presented with a picture that you chose and a phrase that you chose. And if those aren't present when you are logging into a malicious Bank of America website, you can know something is up. So it's like almost like a reverse 2FA, which is still important, and also interesting.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle, because just like, we in the IT space want to verify the identity of our users before they log into an application, the risk of credential theft goes up when a user can't confirm that the application is legit. And for a lot of these large service providers like Verizon, AT&T, that's a prime place for someone to create a fake website. You're trying to log into AT&T to, pay your bill or, upgrade your service, get a new phone. They would love to get your billing information. They would love a wire transfer from you. And so those, kind of identity photos, or I forget what they call them, the security image that you choose is a way of, knowing, oh, right, I recognize this. Now, Duo has a version of that companies can use when the help desk is calling an employee or a user who's in need of support. And that's called help desk verification, where if we're calling the employee who needs tech support, perhaps they were breached and there needs to be some remediation, and it's something you've identified from a security dashboard. As a user, I've never gotten a call like that. I hope I don't, but if I do, I'm going to be skeptical. So help desk verification allows you to send the user a notification through the Duo mobile app, and then you read off a code and say, hey, your Duo mobile app should be showing a code, 667483. And they can confirm, okay, this person at least has administrative access to our Duo account. So, if they're calling me, they're verifying that they have some relation to my IT department. So an interesting way to do two-factor kind of in reverse there.
That's huge. Especially, because like I said, if someone's just throwing information out there to try to casting that net as wide as they can to bring that information in, it's good to do stuff like that. So, we obviously all log into a desktop, right? And then we log into our email, and then we log into bank accounts. We log into all these myriad of different services. Can Duo tie into all of those and allow multi-factor? Because, as we mentioned earlier, remote work is huge nowadays. And you go to your home computer and you do homework, not like homework, but, work at home. Logging into those third-party applications like cloud services, important like QuickBooks Online or, whatever application that I may use for my job, can Duo integrate with those to allow for more secure for those?
Yeah. Christo, would you want to talk about that?
Definitely. Yeah. So we offer a wide range of coverage, like industry leading coverage, really. So your cloud-based applications are covered. So that's, you're talking about your Salesforce accounts, Office 365. You're talking about get a little technical, I know, but SAML, LDAP, Radius, we're covering you. The desktops that you log into too, Windows Logon Solutions, RDP, we're all over that. Google environments, so the Gmail, stuff like that, we're all good with. It's just pretty much kind of the conversations or knowledge that you want to have around Duo is basically go ahead, talk to one of us about it. If you have a lot of questions on, if there is a unique tool that you don't see listed on our website, doesn't mean we don't work with it. It's just kind of a workaround, whether it's generic integration or so on and so forth, but we got you covered.
And one of the important things there is, like Christo, you mentioned, Gmail, Kyle, you mentioned QuickBooks. A lot of these applications, they build some form of 2FA in natively, and we're super in favor of that because you're just incrementally much more secure with any kind of multi-factor, any kind of two-factor than you are without it. The reason to go with a solution like Duo is to consolidate everything. So you have visibility into your logins across different platforms. You have a consistent end user experience. It's easier to support end users if they lose their second factor device, because they don't have to reactivate on, 7 different applications and 7 different, little passcode generators. Everything is streamlined. So it reduces the workload on your help desk. It also reduces the friction for users and makes it consistent for them as well.
Yeah, I use it in my personal life as well. I mean, we use Duo here at work, and I have the ability to add additional tokens to my Duo app. So websites that do offer MFA can work through Duo as well. So it's been really handy to secure things like logins for banks and whatnot. So it's a great multi-factor everything. But at the end of the day, it is fully up to the application vendor to offer those services, right? That's, unfortunately, you can't just force everything to have MFA, even though we'd all probably sleep better at night if it did. So if there may be a vendor that just doesn't offer the connection to be able to set up multi-factor authentication with anything. So if you have a vendor, you can reach out to them and say, hey, look, we want to do this. It's important. But at that point, it's on their development time.
And I won't go too far into detail, but you raise a good point, Kyle, that there has to be some hook or some way for Duo to interact with that authentication protocol. We have native integrations with a lot of tools, but it's always worth having a conversation. You might assume something can't support multi-factor authentication, but there are lots of approaches you can take to make sure the app is behind multi-factor is the term I would use. So some folks will take a web application where it just would be too much hassle. They've developed it internally to add MFA. I would tend to disagree. I think it wouldn't be that much hassle to add it, but then again, I'm not a developer. But what they can do is restrict connections and say you've got to be on the VPN in order to connect to this application. And then it's quite easy. Like I've yet to run into a VPN or firewall login that couldn't support MFA, namely with Duo. So that's one way to put an unsupported application behind MFA. Another way is if it's running on a terminal server or access via remote desktop, you protect the Windows logon with multi-factor. So even though it's not directly on that application, there is some step that's required, which involves multi-factor before that app is accessed.
Yeah, that's great points. So that kind of wraps up everything I had to talk about. Is there any things you wanted to touch on before we wrap it up?
Yeah, we recently released our Trusted Access report for 2021, and there were some interesting, insights in that report about how our customers are using Duo and some trend lines that I wanted to highlight. So at a glance, we see, a 5-fold increase in adoption of passwordless protocols. So this is much lower friction for folks. And as people move towards more single sign-on, more consolidation, like you said, passwordless is a conversation that Microsoft is having. It's an area where Duo is starting to lead as well. Another thing we're beginning to see is just a general increase in use of MFA. Usage rose 39% in the past year by our metrics. So yeah, it absolutely is good. It also speaks to the level of risk and the increase that we saw from remote work and these unprecedented times, as everyone is probably tired of hearing by now. We also saw across our customer deployments an increase in users trying to log in with out-of-date devices being denied access. And so this is actually intended. There was a 33% increase in this. But more and more companies are seeing that MFA is a great first step. It really is picking the low-hanging fruit. But to truly look at security risk from mobile devices and BYOD, or bring your own device risk, Duo is able to look at whether a device is running out-of-date software, risky plugins, browsers that may have known vulnerabilities, and you can deny access to a user, even though they have the second factor, and explain that this particular browser or software is not allowed. So there's a lot more to look at. Yeah, that's most of what I had, though. I really appreciate you having us on the IntelliCast here. Yeah, I'm excited to see who else jumps on, because there's so many interesting trends in the industry. It's hard to keep up with all of them, and there's always something on fire in the news.
Yeah, it's man, it is. To be in the security industry is probably like a roller coaster ride. Yeah. But being on looking at the security stuff, knowing what needs to be done and how it needs to be done is just, it's like daunting. It's almost, it feels like a giant hilly mountain you got to climb. But as long as people take those steps to institute things like MFA and security awareness training and educate users, then I think I think we can get to a point to where it'll be much more safer in the future.
Absolutely.
So, Christo, you have anything to add?
No, just really appreciate you having us on. Looking forward to the other episodes and your other guests. Always, again, constantly learning about the industry and love to hear the progress we're going.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you two joining me. As always, we'll see you next time.